Hi, I'm Mr. Pink, otherwise known as Modern Synthesist, and this is something new. I used to do articles on my blog called Deepthought, which was just kind of looking into like non-model based parts of the hobby, and I had something come up lately that just kind of sparked a thought in me, and I thought that maybe I'd try making a video out of this, because why the hell not? No Creature Conference this Friday. Here's a bonus. So, the other day I was listening to the radio, and there was a interview with the poet Ocean Vuong, and not going to get into poetry, but in the interview he said that art that innovates is optimistic, and if you want to create something useful, it must be hopeful. And this is something that really resonated with me, like the idea of creating art optimistically instead of pessimistically. And I think that that's kind of what a lot of people do when it comes to conversions, especially like I love the kind of conversions people do with Tyranids, obviously, but I see that as optimistic. That instead of sitting there and being like, these Tyranid models are so old, they're so shit, I need new models, get me new models, people look at the old models they have and they find new ways to use them. So I think that's pretty optimistic. But thinking on this quotation about optimism and pessimism in art, I started reflecting on the idea of 3D sculpting, CAD sculpting, and 3D printing models. And asking myself, like, is that optimistic or is that a pessimistic form of art? Because one thing stood out to in my mind most of all was this picture of a parasite of Mortrex that was fan sculpted, so 3D sculpted by someone, ahead of the Parasite of Mortrex release. I went on to Google, I was looking for pictures of a Jetpack Hive Tyrant. Jetpack Hive Tyrant. Let me hear it in the comments if you love Jetpack Hive Tyrants. And yeah, this picture came up, and I was like, oh, that's a Parasite of Mortrex, but it's painted. And this was like 3 weeks before the Parasite release. And I looked closer, I'm like, no, that's not a Parasite of Mortrex. That is someone has taken the pictures that Games Workshop released of the model, they've basically traced it, and they've made their own Parasite of Mortrex. And honestly, my first reaction was to be a snobby asshole about it. And I looked at it, I'm like, well, that's clearly rough sculpting. Like, why don't you try and do something new and different, and create something of your own, rather than just copying what Games Workshop did? So, yeah, I when I was thinking about this idea of, like, optimistic versus pessimistic art, I thought about that Parasite of Mortrex, and I'm like, that's an example of pessimistic art. That's someone who didn't come up with their own idea. They just took some pictures from Games Workshop, they just digitally traced them, and pretty much the same pose, pretty much the same elements, just a little rough around the edges. But then I started thinking less about the model itself, less about the parasite, and more about the process around creating that parasite sculpt and the whole means of distribution angle, where that parasite is now on the internet. It's an STL file. I don't know what the creator did with it, but that's an STL file that can be distributed to anyone on the internet to print out. And though I might not love the sculpting of it, and I might prefer to like grab a Games Workshop one and to convert that to be what I envision for the parasite, I can't deny the fact that there is some optimism that went into the creation of that resculpt, whatever you want to call it, CAD sculpted model, in the sense that just like the speed at which it was created, this thing was created like weeks before the model even came out. And also when it comes to distribution, because the model might not be perfect, and it's not going to compete with the sculpt of the original, but it is the fact that it is a case that STL file can just be slapped up on the internet. And my buddies in Australia, shout out Quarantine Miniatures, Brett and Diana, my buddies in Australia can get that model right now. Whereas if they have to wait for the Games Workshop model, it's been delayed in Australia. It's not going to be there for 2 or 3 weeks after it hits store shelves everywhere else in the world. So maybe there's some optimism in that freeing the means of distribution, whatever communist manifesto thing you want to say. But the reality is that people who want this model or a version of this model can get it right now, as long as they have a printer, they have access to someone who can print it. And maybe the pessimistic view in all of this is the idea that if you want this model, you have to wait for Games Workshop to deliver it to you on their schedule at their inflated price point. So, yeah, like I still buy Games Workshop models and convert them. And, yeah, I'm still not sure how I feel about 3D printed models and resculpts and all that stuff. But it was just interesting for me to reflect on it from the perspective of this like optimistic versus pessimistic view of art, and to see the optimism in something that I thought might have been pessimistic. So, yeah. Let me know how you feel about this situation. I'll link to the original photo of the model that the person 3 sculpted. I think it's on Reddit. I'll link to that in the description below. And yeah, just let me know how you feel about this and like the question of optimism versus optimistic versus pessimistic creation of art. That when you think about people resculpting existing models or concepts and making them freely available on the internet in the form of STL files for whoever wants to print, do you see that as an optimistic approach to the hobby or a pessimistic approach to the hobby? Let me know. And also let me know if you enjoyed this randomness, because I could do more shit like this, but or if it's boring as shit and you don't care, let me know that too, and I won't do any more. Well, no, I don't care what you think. I might do more, but I'd be interested to hear if people are interested in this and hearing more random blathers about shit in this format. So, yeah. And don't worry, Creature Conference will be back soon. Probably next Friday, April... God, what April is that? April something or other. But there won't be a Creature Conference today, obviously, and I might try and do like a weird side stream sometime over the weekend. So make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, and then you can see that when it comes up. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.